You ever hear folks say blood is thicker than water? Well, that saying got tested real hard in my house. One moment we were just another family sitting down to dinner. The next, a single choice blew the lid off a secret affair hiding under our very roof. This ain't no soap opera, it's my life. And let me tell you, once the truth came out, nothing was ever the same again. The air in our house used to have a certain weight to it, a comfortable density made of familiar smells and unspoken routines. It smelled like the laundry detergent I always bought on sale. The faint scent of my husband David's aftershave lingering in the hallway, and whatever was simmering on the stove for dinner. Our life, from the outside, was a portrait of small-town contentment. I'm Sarah, 34 at the time this all happened, and I believed I had built a good life, a solid one. We lived in a 2-story house with a porch swing that creaked just right on a street where you knew your neighbors by the sound of their lawnmowers. David was a high school history teacher, a man people respected. He had a way of making the past feel alive, and he brought that same steady, thoughtful energy home. He was the kind of husband who'd remember to pick up milk without being asked, and who could always make me laugh with a dry, witty comment when I was stressing over bills. We weren't perfect, no marriages, but I thought we were strong. I thought the foundation we'd laid over a decade was made of stone. And then there was our son, Leo. At 14, he was caught in that quiet, awkward space between boyhood and whatever comes next. He had David's dark, thoughtful eyes, but my stubborn chin. He wasn't one of the loud, athletic kids. He was the observer, the one who'd sit on the edge of a family gathering and just watch, taking it all in. We called him our good one, not to compare him to some phantom sibling, but because he just was. He did his homework without being told, helped with the dishes, and never gave us a moment of real trouble. He was the calm center of our little world, the anchor that held David and me together on the days we felt adrift. I trusted him. I trusted him with the house keys, with his little sister when she was born, with my heart. I thought he was the one part of my life that was simple, uncomplicated. Our family dinners were the bedrock of our week. It was the 1 hour where the world outside fell away. No phones at the table. That was the rule. Just us. We'd talk about our days. David would complain about the school board. I'd share a story from the dental office where I worked as a hygienist. And Leo would offer up short, carefully chosen details about his classes or his friends. It was normal. It was ours. But even in that normal, a strange hum had started to vibrate just beneath the surface. It was a tension I couldn't quite name. Sometimes David's phone would light up on the counter, and he'd flip it over a little too quickly. Sometimes a conversation would stop the second I walked into a room. I'd ask who was on the phone, and he'd say, "Just work," or my sister, Emily. She was a constant presence in our lives, my only sibling. She'd drop by for coffee, join us for those family dinners, and babysit Leo on the rare occasions David and I went out. She and David had always gotten along. They shared a similar sense of humor, a love for old movies. I thought it was a blessing, having a husband and a sister who were such good friends. I chalked up the weird energy to stress. David was up for a promotion, I was exhausted from work. Every family goes through phases, I told myself. We were just in a phase. I remember one particular evening, about a week before everything shattered. We were all on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. The air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass. I was leaning my head on David's shoulder. Leo was on the swing, pushing off gently with one foot, his face illuminated by his phone screen. It was a perfect moment, the kind you'd frame and put on the wall. I felt a surge of love so deep it was almost painful. I thought, this is everything. David squeezed my hand and smiled, but his eyes seemed to be looking at something far away. something just over my shoulder. I glanced back, but there was nothing there, just the empty street. I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was letting the low-grade anxiety of modern life seep into my quiet corner of the world. I chose to believe in the picture, not the feeling. I chose to believe in the family I thought I knew. But the night he crossed that boundary, the night my quiet, observant son saw the one thing he was never meant to see, I realized I didn't really know my own home. I didn't know the man sleeping next to me, and I didn't know the secrets that could hide in the whispers between two people who thought everyone else was asleep. The house was dark, swallowed by the deep, silent black of a Tuesday night. It was after midnight. David was already in bed, his breathing a slow, steady rhythm beside me. I was a chronic insomniac, my mind always racing, replaying conversations from the day, making lists for the next. I'd often lie there for hours, just listening to the old house settle around me, the groan of the pipes, the whisper of the wind against the window pane. On this night, I heard a different sound. The soft creak of a floorboard in the hall, followed by the quiet click of the refrigerator door downstairs. It was Leo, I figured. He had inherited my habit of late-night snacking. I smiled to myself in the darkness, picturing him standing in the blue glow of the fridge, deciding between leftover pizza and a carton of milk. A small, familiar comfort. I closed my eyes, trying to drift off, but the sounds from downstairs stopped. There was no returning creak on the stairs, no soft click of his bedroom door closing. There was just silence. An alert part of my brain, the maternal part that never fully sleeps, sat up and took notice. Minutes stretched on, 10, 15. The silence grew heavier, more pronounced. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a sleeping house anymore. It was the tense, held breath quiet of something wrong. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold against the hardwood floor. David didn't stir. I crept to the top of the stairs, my hand gripping the smooth, worn wood of the banister. The downstairs was dark, except for a thin slice of light spilling from under the door to David's study. That was odd. He never worked this late. My heart began to thump a low, nervous beat against my ribs. I made my way down the stairs, each step a calculated, silent press of my foot. The closer I got to the study, the more I could hear. It wasn't the sound of a keyboard or the rustle of papers. It was voices, whispers. One was David's, low and urgent. The other was a woman's, soft and melodic. For a split second, my mind went blank with confusion. Who would be in his study at this hour? Then I recognized the woman's laugh, a quiet, breathy little sound I knew as well as my own. It was Emily, my sister. I stopped breathing. The blood in my veins turned to ice. They were just talking, I told myself. She must have stopped by to drop something off and they lost track of time. It was a flimsy, pathetic excuse, and my own mind laughed at it. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. I wanted to throw the door open, to flood the room with light and righteous anger, but I was paralyzed by a fear so profound it felt like a physical weight pinning me to the floor. And that's when I saw him. Leo. He was huddled at the other end of the hallway, near the kitchen, pressed back into the shadows. He hadn't gone back upstairs. He had been standing there, listening, the whole time. The sliver of light from the study cast a long, distorted shadow in front of him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a kind of horror I had never seen on a child before. He looked broken. He wasn't just a kid who had stumbled upon a secret. He was a boy who had just watched his entire world fracture. Our eyes met across the dark, silent hallway. In his gaze, I saw my own shock and disbelief mirrored back at me, but it was amplified by his innocence. He hadn't yet learned the adult skill of denial, of explaining things away. He saw the truth for what it was, in all its ugly, unvarnished clarity. He lifted a hand as if to reach for me, then let it drop. He looked from me to the study door and back again. The question was clear in his eyes. What do we do? In that moment, 100 different scenarios played out in my head. I could pretend I hadn't seen him, go back to bed and try to forget. I could confront David and Emily right then and there with my son as a witness.
Or I could get my son, take him upstairs and shield him from the blast that was about to come. I chose him. I motioned for him to come to me, and he moved like a sleepwalker, his feet barely making a sound on the floor. I wrapped an arm around his trembling shoulders and led him back up the stairs, away from the poison seeping out from under that door. We sat on his bed, the only light coming from the moon through his window. The silence in the room was a living thing, thick with everything we weren't saying. His body was rigid, coiled with a tension that was heartbreaking in a 14-year-old. "Mom," he finally whispered, his voice cracking. I went to get some water. I heard them, on the back porch first, then they came inside." I just nodded, unable to speak. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead, my hand shaking. His skin was cold. "They didn't see me," he continued, his eyes fixed on a spot on his wall. He was telling her he loved her. The words hit me like a physical blow. I flinched, a sharp gasp of air escaping my lips. Hearing it from him, from my child, made it real in a way the whispers hadn't. It wasn't just a flirtation, a mistake. It was a declaration. He finally looked at me, his young face old with a burden he should never have had to carry. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't want you to. I don't know. I didn't know what to do." He was apologizing. My son was apologizing for uncovering a betrayal that had just ripped my life in two. I pulled him into a hug, holding him tight, trying to absorb his pain into my own body. He felt so fragile. I looked at his face, torn between his loyalty to me and the horror of what he knew. And I had to wonder, and I ask you this now, if it was your kid, your child, standing there with a truth that could either save you or destroy you, would you want him to tell you? Or would you rather he protect you from a pain that deep, even if it meant living a lie? He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. He took a shaky breath. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible. It was Aunt Emily. And once those words left his mouth, confirming the sickening dread that had already taken root in my soul, the entire house went cold. The familiar warmth, the comfort, the very air I breathed, it all just vanished, replaced by a vast, empty chill. It was the beginning of the end, and my son was the one who had to light the fuse. Disbelief is a strange, powerful anesthetic. For the first few hours after Leo spoke those words, my mind refused to accept them. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding. He was a kid. He'd misinterpreted a late-night conversation between a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. My brain frantically constructed walls, built scenarios where it all made sense. Maybe Emily's car had broken down. Maybe she'd had a fight with her boyfriend and came to David for advice because she didn't want to wake me. I clung to these flimsy explanations like a drowning woman clings to a piece of driftwood. The next morning, the sun came up as it always did, a cheerful, obnoxious yellow that felt like a personal insult. I went through the motions of our morning routine on autopilot. I made coffee, I packed Leo's lunch. David came into the kitchen, yawning, and kissed the top of my head. "Morning, babe," he said, his voice thick with sleep. The casual intimacy of the gesture, something that would have comforted me just 24 hours earlier, now felt like a violation. I stiffened, my whole body rejecting his touch. He gave me a strange look. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just didn't sleep well," I mumbled, turning back to the counter, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge. I felt like a spy in my own life, a fraud in my own kitchen.
Every normal, everyday object was suddenly tainted. The matching coffee mugs Emily had given us for Christmas felt like mocking artifacts. The family photo on the fridge, the four of us, me, David, Leo, and Emily, all smiling at a summer barbecue, seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. In the photo, David had his arms slung casually around Emily's shoulders. I'd never thought twice about it before. Now, I couldn't unsee it. I saw the way her head was tilted just slightly toward his, the private shared light in their eyes. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? The feeling was physical. I felt like the rug had been yanked out from under me, sending me tumbling into a dizzying, disorienting freefall. The very ground beneath my feet, the foundation of my marriage, my family, my identity as a wife and sister had crumbled into dust. I was suspended in a state of nauseous shock. Every memory I had of the past few years began to flicker and warp, replaying in my mind through this new, sickening filter. The late nights David said he was working, the constant stream of text messages he'd laugh off as just Emily being dramatic, the time they'd volunteered to do the Thanksgiving dishes together, shooing me out of the kitchen, their laughter echoing down the hall. Each memory was a fresh stab of betrayal, a clue I had failed to see. Leo was quiet at breakfast, moving his cereal around his bowl with a spoon, his eyes downcast. David tried to engage him, asking about a history test. Leo just shrugged, giving one-word answers. The tension between the three of us was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. But David, astonishingly, seemed oblivious. Or maybe he was just a better actor than I was. I knew I couldn't live like this, suspended in the horrifying space between suspicion and certainty. Leo's word was enough for my heart, but my rational mind, the part of me that still desperately wanted him to be wrong, needed proof. It needed something cold, hard, and undeniable, something I could hold in my hand and say, this is real. That night, I waited until David was in the shower, the sound of the water drumming against the tiled walls, providing a cover for my crime. My hands trembled as I picked up his phone from the nightstand. It felt alien in my palm, a sleek, black Pandora's box. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure he'd be able to hear it over the shower. I didn't know his passcode. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried my birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary, my fingers fumbling on the screen. The phone unlocked. The breath I'd been holding escaped in a shaky whoosh. For a split second, the irony was so bitter it tasted like acid in my mouth. He'd used the date our life together began to hide the evidence of its ending. I opened his messages. My eyes scanned the list of recent conversations, work colleagues, friends, and then her name, Emily. My finger hovered over it, a wave of nausea washing over me. This was it, the point of no return. I tapped the screen, and there it was. Not just a conversation, an entire world. A world I had no idea existed, running parallel to my own. Months and months of messages. Scrolling up, I saw their secret language unfold. Inside jokes, flirtatious banter that quickly escalated into something else entirely. Plans to meet, disguised as errands, and the declarations. I miss you. I can't stop thinking about you. Today was amazing. I wish we didn't have to hide. And then the pictures. Selfies she'd sent him from her car, her bedroom. A picture he had taken of her laughing in a place I didn't recognize. They looked happy, carefree, like two people falling in love, unburdened by the lives they were shattering in the process. Each message, each photo, was a fresh wound. I was reading the story of my husband falling in love with my sister, and it was the most brutal, soul-crushing thing I had ever experienced. The sound of the shower stopped. Panic seized me. I quickly closed the app, locked the phone, and placed it back on the nightstand exactly as I'd found it. I scrambled back to my side of the bed, pulling the covers up to my chin, just as the bathroom door opened. David walked out, a towel around his waist, steam billowing around him. "You okay?" he asked again, toweling his hair dry. You're white as a sheet." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at him, this man who was a complete stranger to me. The proof I had so desperately sought was now burning a hole in my mind. It wasn't a relief. It was an anchor, dragging me down into the darkest, coldest depths of betrayal. There was no misunderstanding. There was no mistake. There was only the truth. And that proof, that terrible, undeniable proof, forced me to face the ugliest truth of all. The life I thought I had was a lie, and the two people I trusted most in the world were the ones who had built it. The confrontation didn't happen in a blaze of glory. There was no dramatic movie-style entrance. It happened in the dead of night, 2 days later, in the quiet hum of our living room. I hadn't slept. I had been moving through my life like a ghost, the words from those text messages branded onto the inside of my eyelids. Every time David spoke to me, every time he touched my arm, my skin crawled. The charade was eating me alive. He found me on the couch at 2 a.m., staring at the blank television screen. The blue light from his phone, the one he was trying to hide as he walked into the room, was the final straw. "What are you doing up?" he asked, his voice a careful, cautious thing. He knew something was wrong. He must have felt the Arctic chill that had replaced the warmth in our home. I didn't look at him. I just kept staring at the screen. "I know, David," I said. My voice was eerily calm, a dead, flat tone that didn't sound like my own. "Know what?" He tried to sound casual, but a tremor of fear ran underneath the word. I finally turned my head and met his eyes. "I know about you and Emily." The color drained from his face. In that one instant, I saw it all. The shock, the panic, the frantic, desperate search for a lie that would work. But there was no lie left. He knew from my eyes that I had seen the truth. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I'd once found endearing. Now it just looked pathetic. "Sarah, it's not what you think," he started, the classic, cowardly opening line of every unfaithing man in history. "Isn't it?" I stood up, the calm facade finally cracking, a hot, furious energy surging through me. "Isn't it you telling my sister you love her? Isn't it you meeting her in secret? Isn't it you sending her pictures and making plans and building a whole separate life while I was here in this house, raising our son and believing in you?" My voice rose with every question, the words tearing from my throat, raw and ragged. Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I am so sorry. Sorry isn't good enough." I was shouting now, the sound echoing in the silent house. "You didn't just cheat on me, David. You did it with my sister, the one person in the world I should have been able to trust, my blood. Did you ever for 1 second think about me? Did you think about Leo?" At the mention of his name, a sob escaped my lips. That was the deepest cut of all. He had put our son in the middle of this filth. The argument that followed was a hurricane of pain and accusation. Tears streamed down my face, hot and blurring my vision. He cried too. He pleaded. He begged. He said it started as a friendship, that they were both lonely, that it just happened. The excuses were so flimsy, so insulting, they just fueled my rage. In the middle of it all, I did something I knew would change everything forever. I picked up my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called Emily. She answered on the second ring, her voice sleepy. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "No, Emily, nothing is okay," I said, my voice dripping with ice. "David and I are just having a little chat about the two of you. I thought you might want to join." I put the phone on speaker, placing it on the coffee table between us. Silence. Then a choked sob from the other end of the line. David stared at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. The three of us were connected in that moment by a web of deceit, and I was the one pulling all the strings tight. What followed was a mess of crosstalk, of David trying to calm me down, of Emily crying and saying she never meant for this to happen. It was pathetic. It was ugly. And it was necessary. The raw emotion of that night left us both hollowed out, but the battle was far from over.
The next day, the news spread like a virus through our family. I called my parents. I had to tell them before they heard it from someone else. I expected shock. I expected sympathy. What I got was a horrifying attempt at mediation. My mother, a woman who prized the appearance of a happy family above all else, was the first to crack. "Sarah, honey, are you sure you're not overreacting?" she said, her voice laced with a desperate, placating tone. "People make mistakes, terrible mistakes, but David is your husband. Emily is your sister. You can't just throw away your entire family over this." I was stunned into silence. I felt the ground beneath me give way for a second time. My own mother was asking me to forgive, to forget, to swallow the most profound betrayal of my life for the sake of keeping up appearances. My father was quieter, but no less devastating. "Think of Leo," he said. "This will destroy him." As if I wasn't thinking of him. As if protecting him wasn't the only thing keeping me standing. They sided with the idea of family. They sided with preserving the unit even if the unit was rotten from the inside out. I looked at the wreckage of my life, at the two people who had betrayed me and the parents who were now asking me to enable it. And I had to ask myself, and I have to ask you, when your world is on fire, what would you have done? Would you walk away from the ashes and try to build something new? Or would you stay and fight for the scorched, broken thing that was left? David confessed, but he twisted the story. He painted a picture of a lonely, neglected husband, of a wife who was too busy, too tired. Emily sang the same tune, speaking of a deep connection she'd never felt before, as if her profound emotional discovery gave her the right to detonate my life. They weren't malicious, they claimed. They were just two lost souls who found each other. They made it sound like a tragic romance, and I was just the inconvenient, shrewish wife standing in the way of their destiny. Their excuses were shocking in their selfishness. But the real shock, the blow that nearly knocked me off my feet for good, wasn't their pathetic justification. It was who took their side. It was my own mother, looking me in the eye and telling me that forgiveness was my duty, that my anger was the thing that was truly tearing the family apart, not the affair, my reaction to it. That was a betrayal I never saw coming. The fallout was a quiet, suffocating wave that seeped into every corner of my life. In a small town, a secret like this has a short shelf life. It doesn't travel through loud gossip, but through whispers, through knowing glances exchanged over produce at the grocery store, through the sudden hush that falls when you walk into the local diner. I could feel it everywhere I went. I was no longer Sarah, the dental hygienist, Leo's mom. I was the woman whose husband cheated on her with her own sister. I was a story, a cautionary tale. The humiliation was a physical presence, a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. I felt their pity, their judgment, their morbid curiosity. Every smile from a neighbor felt forced. Every "how are you doing" felt loaded. I wanted to scream at them all, to tell them they had no idea. But I also, in a strange and twisted way, felt a sliver of relief. The secret was out. The lie was over. I no longer had to walk around with this toxic, radioactive truth buried in my chest, pretending that the air in my own home wasn't poisoned. The tension that had been humming beneath the surface of our lives for months was gone, replaced by the clean, sharp agony of the truth. It hurt, but at least it was real. The person I worried about most was Leo. He was the silent, walking casualty of it all. He became even quieter, retreating into his room, into his headphones, into himself. He had to face his friends at school, had to endure the sympathetic looks from his teachers who knew his father. He was carrying a weight that no 14-year-old should ever have to bear. I watched him, my heart aching with a guilt so profound it felt like a sickness. He had been the one to bring the truth to light, and now he was paying the price. One evening, I found him sitting on his bed, just staring at the wall, the same way he had on the night he told me. I sat down beside him, the silence stretching between us. "Are you okay?" I asked softly. It was a stupid question. Of course he wasn't okay. He just shrugged, not looking at me. "People at school know," he said, his voice flat.
someone's mom told them. "I'm so sorry, Leo," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "This is my fault, all of it." He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes, those dark, thoughtful eyes so much like his father's, were filled with a fierce, protective anger. "No," he said, his voice firm. "It's not your fault. It's theirs." In that moment, I saw a flash of the man he was going to become. He wasn't just ashamed or guilty. He was proud. Proud that he had spoken up. Proud that he had protected me. He had chosen a side. He had chosen me. And that single, simple act of loyalty was the one thing that kept me from completely falling apart. The decision to separate was the logical next step, but it wasn't an easy one. It was a death by 1,000 cuts. The dividing of possessions, the awkward conversations about finances, the heartbreaking task of telling Leo that his father was moving out. David moved into a small apartment across town. The day he packed his boxes, the house felt cavernous, hollowed out. There was no shouting, no final, dramatic fight, just a sad, exhausted resignation. We were two people who had once built a life together, now methodically dismantling it, piece by piece. The hardest part was drawing the new boundaries. With David, it was clear, if painful. But with my family, that was a tangled, thorny mess. I told my mother I needed space, that I couldn't be around Emily. This was treated as a personal failing, an inability to forgive. Family holidays were approaching, and the pressure was already mounting to be the bigger person and put this behind us for the sake of the family. But their definition of family now felt like a cage, one I refused to be locked in. I was drawing a line in the sand, not just for myself, but for my son. I had to show him that you don't reward betrayal with a seat at the dinner table. I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Leo and I were finding a new rhythm, a new, quieter normal. The house was ours. We ate dinner in front of the TV, we stayed up late watching movies. It was scarred and broken, but it was a life. I thought the worst was over. I thought we could finally start to heal. And just when I thought it was over, just when I started to breathe again, the past came knocking again. It was a letter, left in our mailbox, addressed to me in my mother's familiar, looping handwriting. Inside wasn't a note of apology or support. It was an invitation to my sister's wedding. She and David were getting married. The aftermath of betrayal isn't a single event. It's a change in the climate. The air you breathe is different forever. Trust, once shattered, doesn't just glue back together. The pieces are still there, but the cracks remain, and you learn to live with the fragility of it all. The wedding invitation was a stark, brutal reminder of that. They weren't just moving on, they were building a new life on the rubble of mine. And they expected my family, my own parents, to attend, to smile, to celebrate. Family dinners became a minefield. When I would go to my parents' house, a rare and strained occasion, Emily and David's names would hang in the air, unspoken. My mother would talk about them in vague, careful terms, referencing the kids and their new house, as if trying to normalize the unthinkable. She couldn't understand why I wouldn't just accept it. To her, blood was blood, and my refusal to engage with my sister was a stubborn, selfish act. We no longer spoke of love or loyalty, we spoke of obligation. The small-town whispers didn't die down, they just evolved. I was no longer the tragic victim. I was the bitter ex-wife, the unforgiving sister. In their narrative, I was the one holding the grudge, the one preventing the family from healing. It changes you. It hardens you in places you didn't even know were soft. I found myself becoming more cynical, more guarded. When a new friend at work would invite me out, my first thought wasn't excitement, it was suspicion. My trust in human connection, and the simple belief that people are who they say they are, had been fundamentally broken. It wasn't just about romantic love, it was about everything. If my own husband and my own sister could do this, what was to stop anyone else? The person who navigated this new world with the most grace was Leo. He saw his father, but on his own terms. He was polite, but distant. He created a boundary that I, as an adult, was still struggling to build. He never once went to the new house David and Emily shared. He made his loyalty clear, not with loud proclamations, but with quiet, unwavering consistency. He was my rock, my moral compass. One night we were sitting on the porch, on that same swing where I'd once felt such a perfect sense of peace. It was a cool autumn evening, the leaves skittering across the driveway. Leo was 16 now, taller, his voice deeper, but he still had those same old, observant eyes. We'd been sitting in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the neighborhood settle down for the night. "Mom?" he said, his voice quiet. "Yeah, honey?" He took a deep breath, and I could tell he was wrestling with something big. "Do you ever wish I hadn't told you?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and real. I had asked myself that same question 1,000 times in the dead of night. Would ignorance have been bliss? Would the slow, corrosive poison of a lie have been better than the swift, clean cut of the truth? "No," I said, and I was surprised by how certain I was. I would never wish that. Knowing the truth is always better. He was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that I knew had been haunting him for 2 years. "Did I ruin our family?" he asked, his voice cracking just a little, a remnant of the 14-year-old boy still inside him. Or did I save it? I looked at my son, at this incredible young man who had been forced to grow up too fast, who had carried the weight of our family's implosion on his shoulders. He hadn't ruined us. He had exposed what was already ruined. He had saved me. He had saved us from a life built on a lie. But what was left? A mother and a son, adrift from the rest of their family. Was that a family saved, or just a smaller, more isolated wreckage? The question echoed in my own heart. It's the central paradox of a life-altering truth. Does it heal you by cauterizing the wound, or does it just destroy everything faster, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind? I turned to my audience, to you, and I have to ask you the same thing. Do you think a truth that devastating ultimately heals, or does it just clear the way for a different kind of pain, a scar that never fades? I pulled my son into a hug, the porch swing creaking beneath us. "You saved me, Leo," I whispered into his hair. "You saved me." And that was the only answer that mattered. But his other question, about our family, about whether it was saved or destroyed, that's the question I still can't answer today. The scars left by betrayal are not the kind that fade with time. They are the kind that become part of your landscape, like canyons carved by a river of grief. You learn to navigate around them. You learn which edges are too steep to approach, which memories are too sharp to touch. It's been 5 years now. Leo's in college, studying to be an architect, a builder of things, an irony that is not lost on me. He is a good man, strong, kind, and fiercely loyal. The best parts of his father with none of the weakness. I am still in the same house. For a long time it felt like a ghost, haunted by memories of a life that wasn't real. But slowly Leo and I filled it with new memories, memories that belonged only to us. We repainted the walls, we got a dog, we made it our own. It is no longer a crime scene. It's a sanctuary. I see David sometimes when he comes to town to see Leo. He and Emily are still married. They have a child of their own. The encounters are civil but sterile. We talk about the weather, about Leo's classes. We are two strangers who share a past and a son. There is no anger left in me, not really. Just a profound and lasting sadness for what was lost, and for the man I thought I knew. I have not spoken to my sister since the day I called her from the living room. My relationship with my parents remains strained, a fragile truce built on the shaky ground of things left unsaid. They attend my nephew's birthday parties. I do not. Blood may be thicker than water, but betrayal injects a poison that thins it out, leaving it weak and anemic. I've learned that trust, once it's been broken on such a fundamental level,
can heal, but it will never, ever be the same. The new trust you build in yourself and others is a different creature entirely. It's not the blind, joyful faith of innocence. It is a cautious, weathered thing. It's a trust that has been tested by fire, and it understands the devastating power of lies. It's wiser, perhaps, but it's also sadder. There's an old folk saying that comes to mind when I think about it all. It's about a beautiful, priceless bell that gets a crack in it. You can have it repaired, you can have it polished, you can hang it back in the tower and let it ring, and it will. It will still make a sound. But if you listen closely, you'll always hear the crack. My life, my family, my heart, they all still ring. I am happy, I am whole, I am at peace. But if you listen closely, you can still hear the crack. And I think maybe you always will.
This wasn't just a story about infidelity. It was about the moment my son chose truth over silence and the ripple effect of that single brave choice. He crossed a boundary to save me from a lie, and in doing so, he taught me everything I know about love and loyalty. If you've ever lived through a betrayal, big or small, I want to hear your story below. How did you find your way through it? Because sometimes the only way to heal is to know you're not the only one with a crack in the bell. Thank you for listening.